further request Dr. Ramachandra sir to throw more light on this issue at large about if he can also give us certain backdrop of the issue and about how overall the liberty and human rights situation in Afghanistan is in reality, about what all are the notions regarding women's rights, the rights of the rights of the people at large, because it is generally considered that the Taliban, who are also called in Pashto as the students, they claim, okay, that we have tried to bring out peace, order, and stability in Afghanistan. But in the light of that, there have been several apprehensions. The very fact that the 9/11 invasion happened by the United States later, it was because that they harbor terrorist organizations like Al Qaeda and other such ISISK also. So, how do you see the future of liberty in Afghanistan? And on that light only, I request and other such issues along with the backdrop, and I hereby invite Dr. Ramachandra sir to kindly guide us and throw some light on it.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much, Bhavya, for organizing this. Let me first ask you, we were supposed to wrap up by 1:30 and it's almost 1:30. So how much time do we have? And then
so we have time till 2. We have, you can take around 20-25 minutes, no problem, because the session got a bit late. We'll try to wind it up by 2:15 at the max. We'll give 15-20 minutes question answer session. So
okay,
you can continue for 20-25 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. No, I would actually like to take more questions and then accordingly go rather than what we want to talk about. But anyways, I will give you all a rough summary of my experience. And let me, without getting into any formalities of thanking the organizers and the professors and everything, let me, in the interest of time, let me come directly to the point. And well, I spent a year in Afghanistan. I was based out of Kabul from 2018 to 19. And I think that has been one of the most enriching experiences of my life, being there. And when I went there, and let me also tell you, I don't claim to be an expert on the subject, but I do have certain perspectives and the way things being interpreted in media and social media, where I do think that there could be alternative ways of thinking about it, or more strategic ways of thinking about it. But anyways, interestingly, when I have been working in education policy space, and I was there in Afghanistan also to work on education and education policy, and nothing on international relations or the terrorism or the insecurity or the violence or the etc. was in my mind. And in fact, when I was planning to go to, I was under impression that okay, the terrorism and the violence etc. is all gone. It's an old story before the US came to Afghanistan, and now the things are pretty much on track. It's the country is progressing towards peace and prosperity, and I'm going to kind of make my small contribution in the progress. And I was completely not aware of anything about Afghanistan, even the past or different groups that function, anything. I mean, I was completely a blank slate. But my journey specifically starts from when my first flight to Kabul was to land at the airport, and it landed at the airport. And while it was taxiing, I saw so much of like army stuff at the airport, and like the kind of helicopters and the fighter planes and drones etc. that I have only seen in movies, I could see at the airport, and I wondered why all of these things are still here. And that is on the like my first landing, and my question started, the curiosity started happening. As I reached my hotel where I was supposed to stay, the first thing they said, you know, as I walked in, that we have to do a security drill. I said, okay, we'll do the security drill. Let me check in and get fresh and all of that. But they said, no, the first thing is the security drill. I said, okay. And when I first day entered into my office too, they said first thing will happen is the security drill. And then I thought, why so much on security? And then slowly started realizing that the country is still under a lot of trouble. And then I realized that when I was there and like in the so anyways, so in my interpretation, when 2001 US came and created this new government, I think they kind of completely threw Taliban out. But at the same time, we should keep in mind that they were killing Talibanese people, but not the ideology. And therefore, more and more people at any point of time you can read and bring into the army, etc. So that's one point number one. Point number two, I think when Obama was the president, and they decided to withdraw NATO forces, I think somewhere after 2008. Later on, Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize as well. But post 2008 only, things started getting bad once again. And slowly, Taliban had started capturing different regions. And when I was there in 2018, by that time, 50% of the country was already captured by Taliban. So it was nothing new that Taliban came all of a sudden in 2 days and kind of toppled the government and took over everything. They were there, pretty much there. While I was there in Kabul, almost every single day there was some kind of blast and attack and something happening. So in fact, I have faced one of the, I mean, it was completely different experience when roughly 500 away from my office where I was, and I was in a meeting with my team members, and all of a sudden huge blast happened roughly 500 meters away from our office. And this was one Christian-based organization which was targeted and targeted by Taliban itself. And the blast was so huge. For a moment, I didn't even think of that this is a blast because our entire building shook, and I felt like it's an earthquake. Anyways, we had to quickly rush to the safe house, etc., safe room, etc., etc. And since then we, and because this place happened to be very close to our place of residence, we didn't go back to our residence. We were immediately shifted to a different place and all. Anyways, the key point I was making, that Taliban was pretty much there. They were active, there was violence, and this government was not able to control. And this story had already started from 2008. Now, let me come to the present situation as to the key things. Development happened very recently, and Taliban coming up. How did that happen? And in fact, when I was there, and then as I said, I went there pretty much with a blank slate. I was also able to travel a little bit. I went with Khalid to Mazar-e-Sharif. With my work, I went to Herat and Kabul. So I got to experience the three different cities. Yeah, anyways, so if I fast forward it and come to the present development that has happened in recent past, what are the key things that have happened? So the key, I think when US was kind of leading the government of Afghanistan in the leadership of initially with Mr. Hamid Karzai and later on Mr. Ghani, I see that there was a huge opportunity. And the opportunity was to make one united Afghanistan. The reality is what we understand as one country, Afghanistan, is actually a place of different fractions, different ethnic groups, and they are not united. And in fact, when multiple times in media and social media, and even the extremist forces have took this as an opportunity to propagate their agenda, they say Afghanistan is a graveyard of emperors. So right now they have defeated US. Before that, they have defeated I mean, US, which is kind of the superpower of the time. Before that, Russia, which was the superpower of that time. Before that, British, which was the superpower of that time. And before that, also many more emperors like Mughals and the Mongols and many of those, right? So they very proudly call them this place like a graveyard of empires, but also they forget, which they don't talk about it. Yes, many superpowers have come to this place and ruled it for some time, and then later on had to leave the place, and this is being shown as a great victory of Afghan people and all. But what is the underlying story that they don't tell you? That yes, for centuries, and specifically for last 4 decades, for 40 years, you have been completely ravaged. You have been in war, and you have been captured by multiple superpowers of different times, right? Why does that happen? It basically happens because of the lack of unity. And I was with Khalid in a conference that he had organized in Mazar-e-Sharif, and had invited me also to deliver a keynote address. And I basically talked about that, when US came, at least they were not like barbaric forces. There is an international interest for sure, but they at least have to follow some mandate, some procedures, some democratic principles, etc. And this should have been taken as an opportunity to build a new Afghanistan where all different ethnic groups come together. I still, even today, I see all of them are divided. There is like Mazar group, General Dostam is completely different, has interest and ideology. Then there is, Herat group has a different interest, and kind of everyone wanted to be kind of the president of the country or the king of the country, right? And there are different characters, and all of these leaders, if you actually study them, they all are different characters. I'm forgetting this name of that engineer with the beard guy, who kind of completely shifts his role and character depending upon who is the superpower coming there, etc., etc. So the point number one is, when there was at least US government, I see that there was an opportunity to bring the entire country together and create a consensus-based government, but that never happened. Mr. Ghani and Mr. Karzai were mostly a puppet government. They were, and therefore they were never seen as the legitimate power holders. People accepted, bhai, America's supported government and they are like the king of today. So you have to accept the reality, but in principle, in morality, they never accepted them as the key leader. That's one. And second is, as corruption charges came up, they started losing their legitimacy and all of that. And that is the key reason that when Taliban was coming back once again, it was easy for them, like roughly 90,000 of Taliban Ladakhis, I will call, and roughly 3 lakhs of army personnel of Afghanistan, but they couldn't find, because they also had never accepted the legitimacy in some manner or the other. They were not paid for months, and there were huge corruption charges, and they kind of knew that Ghani is going to go. And let me give you, we should not, what I'm going to next talk about is should not be seen as a very good analogy, but let's consider a bad analogy. But I would kind of, for the better understanding and easy understanding of our audience, I would kind of match Mr. Ghani with, let's say, Rahul Gandhi of Congress Party today. So while he is holding the president position, but being, sorry to say, incompetent, and therefore even there are some good leaders who can unite Congress Party, can revive it, can bring new energy and bring the new government. No one can do it as long as there is Mr. Rahul Gandhi. But he is holding the president position, and therefore others could also not do it. and he himself is unable to do it. Some was the condition of Mr. Ghani. So he was not able to unite people, bring consensus, bring people together, etc., to fight Taliban. Um, but at the same time, he was the president and he was holding the position and power. No one else could do anything, even they wanted to. So, in any case, well, so Mr. Ghani leaving the country, I see, well, it had to happen. And I was talking to a few people in Afghanistan couple of days and weeks before what recently happened when Taliban toppled and took over, captured Kabul. I was able to actually predict, and I told people that you leave, this is what is going to happen. So based on the factor, if I am sitting thousands of kilometers away, um, uh, and uh, and with only a limited experience could predict it, how could US and other governments could say that intelligence failure was there? They couldn't predict that Taliban was coming, etc., etc. So those are actually just a sham, just an excuse. Anyway, so I see Mr. Ghani leaving as the worst thing to happen, but also at the same time the best thing to happen. Why worst thing to happen? Because when a country has to flee away, that's certainly not a good thing. That, as I said, it becomes a matter of shame. But also, it's a good thing that finally he left that position, and that gave an opportunity to the vice president, Mr. Amrullah Saleh, and he said, "Now technically I am the president because my president has run away. Technically, I'm the president. I should be the president." And he went to Panjshir and he said we would start resisting and we would not accept Taliban, etc., etc. Now, when you talk about Amrullah Saleh, you talk about Panjshir, then the completely new chapter opens up. Then you have to understand the entire Panjshir and Tajik and what has been history, etc., etc. And I got to actually visit Panjshir also. And when I was there, it was supposed to be the safest place in the country. For many other places, we had to take the security permission, but for Panjshir as well, but not as much because always it was considered that this is the safest place in the country. And I got to interact. So let me also talk about a little bit of my experience of, I got to meet in Panjshir and was hosted by in this current Mr. Ghani's government. He was the law minister. And before that, he was the judge of the Supreme Court. And when I asked about what he thinks of India, the first thing he talked about is, he said, you see what religious extremism has done to our country in last 4 decades. It's completely devastated. And I hope India does not follow the same route, right? So it was kind of his understanding that the Islam extremism, what is that has led us to, that we are living in a devastated country in 4 decades of war. People are hungry, no food, no education, nothing, no human rights, etc., etc. And hopefully India does not follow that route. And he was kind of indicating that nationalism kind of stream gathering in country with BJP coming to power, etc., etc. Not that they are against it, but is based on his experience. But anyways, so when you talk about Panjshir, then you have to understand this character called, I keep forgetting his name, Mr. Ahmad Shah Massoud, who was called a Lion of Panjshir, and later on he was given the honor of a hero of Afghanistan. And that was an interesting character that I got introduced and a little bit studied and interacted with his fellow people and all, and got to know that he was a great fighter. By education, he was an engineer, but basically he was kind of a born strategist. And he was the one who initially, when in the previous version of Taliban too, when Taliban was holding power, he was the one who had decided to fight against Taliban government. And it was his Panjshiri group first, and later on, but he did not stop. He knew that we being a one small ethnic group, we cannot fight the entire powerhouse. and therefore he had started uniting other leaders as well, and then created Northern Alliance. So it was not just then Panjshir, it became Northern Alliance, and they continued to fight for against Taliban. And that's the key reason even today Panjshiris are fighting. And I'm still in touch with a few people there, and who say this is more like an honor for us. We have kind of completely told people, our own people, that will fight to death. So we would accept to die rather than accept to have this Taliban government, Taliban is ruling us. So we would continue to fight. But in the sense of, if you think of in future, what would happen? Could the Northern Alliance kind of history be repeated? At the moment, if you ask me, it looks very difficult. Not easy, not easy. Why so? Because at that point of time, at least Northern Alliance had received support from many other groups, including India. So Indian government also had supported them in the background to fight against Taliban. And at that point of time, Taliban had different image and they had no recognition, etc., etc. I mean, were not recognized really by the world community. But this time, when they have negotiated with US across the table, on the same table, which means today or tomorrow, US is going to recognize this government. China was the first one to recognize the kind of come forward for the Taliban government in Afghanistan. Pakistan by default is going to do this. And I mean, if you want to understand international politics, the best places you have try to understand Afghanistan, and you would get to introduce the whole range of international politics that is happening. Anyways, so at the moment, I don't really think Panjshir Group and Northern Alliances have any scope for the time being. But in future, we'll have to see if they are able to give good resistance, and many world community members also who cannot accept Taliban for whatever reason, and they start supporting them, they may continue resistance for a longer time. But now Taliban is much more powerful than the Taliban version 1, let's call it Taliban 2.0. They're much more powerful in terms of legitimacy, in terms of recognition, in terms of also building their own media and social media presence. So kind of saying, you know, we are also reformed and we are changed and we accept human rights and women's rights, etc., etc. Now they have access to Air Force, while they were continue to fight against US presence, against Mujahideen, against whatever. They were only, let's say, 90,000 people fighting with guns and rocket launchers, etc., etc., some weapons. So they only had an army, but no Air Force. But now that they are in power, they have access to Air Force and the modern equipment that US has left, etc., etc. With the international recognition and international politics coming to support them, they are much more powerful, and doesn't look like Panjshiris or any internal force at the moment can continue with the resistance for a long time. But in this case, what's the future, or what are the key lessons to take? I mean, so Taliban with their media and etc. presence, they would make sure that their external perception that they create gets changed, and that is where their effort is going to be. And for that reason, they would continue to say, hey, we are here for the peace and prosperity and get together and no violence anymore, and we are okay to work with India, we are okay to work with Pakistan, we are okay to work with Russia, US, whoever, right? So they would talk about it, but we must keep in mind that this will be temporary as long as they gain the legitimacy from the world community, international community. But there are fundamentalists and extremists within the group. Now, the second important point will be, once again, as I have said, they have fought against the foreign invaders, but whenever they were left alone, they have also, there is a history, they have started fighting among themselves. So when, let's say, Russians left, there were Mujahideen, and then happened to be a civil war, right? Currently, also you see this entire narrative based on Islam extremism. Then who is the best leader? Who is the most extremist and who is the more fundamentalist in terms of Islam, not liberal, right? And therefore, what happens, like, jo jitna jyada kattar hai. So from this existing government to, let's say Taliban, we are the torch bearer and flag bearer of Islam because we are more pious and pure based on what? My extremism. Then the Haqqani group comes up and he says, I am the more Islamist because I'm more cutter than you. And then IS will come. And then, there are multiple groups. I mean, 50s or hundreds of different groups. So here within Taliban also, it will be a huge challenge for them. Would they be able to stay together? Because also when the rule is, the ruler becomes so, it's jiski lathi uski bhais, who is more powerful, and here is no discussion based on consensus and democratic principles and morality and all, is based on the power. So someone tomorrow within the group will say, hey, today I'm more powerful and I want to be the president and the king and whatever I want to rule the country, right? So within the group also, and with the multiple other groups, like this recent bomb blast at Afghanistan, Kabul airport was by IS, and there's a new fraction that has come on. What is the KT, Khurasan province? By the time when I was there, also few activities happened, and I read about Khurasan province, and I wondered what is it. And then I asked my colleagues who were working there, in my team members, where is this Khurasan district? There is no Khurasan district. Then I looked at Google Afghanistan map and I tried to find the Khorasan province, and I couldn't find it. And then I got to know, okay, this is more of a concept that there should be a larger Khorasan province, which would start from Iran, includes Afghanistan and Pakistan, maybe Kashmir also, and slowly they can expand. So it's थोड़ा सा इस तरीके से भी कह सकते हैं. For an example, in RSS ideology, sometimes we talk about the Akhand Bharat, which actually starts from, let's say, Afghanistan till Myanmar, Burma, right? That is the larger Hindu nation that we want to make, and they have the larger Khorasan province to make, and then there is already a larger, ISIS. Interestingly, when it was founded, ISIS was called Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Now the completely name has also changed. Now it is called only IS, or at times Daesh. Now what is that? Islamic State, which means not only in Iraq and Syria, around the world. Their kind of agenda is to have the Islamic State all around the world. There should be only one religion, etc., etc. Anyways, so what is the key lesson that I draw? And specifically, why I even agreed to come to this talk, this gathering and talk about it. And it's first time that I'm talking about my Afghanistan experience in public, is that soon after this recent development in Afghanistan, Indian social media space was quite a bit buzzing with messages like this one I'm going to read, which I think is they are actually manipulating and bringing wrong conclusion in people's mind. So it says, your dream house, dream car, dream life, bank balance, business shall all turn to dust if your nation does not stand, right? Your assets are valueless if your country has no asset. So there's these 2 points basically is written from the strong nationalism in mind. The third point, you can become a refugee in minutes if your leaders sell you off and flee away. giving reference to Mr. Ghani. So it's talking about strong leadership, but I'm afraid that through this, they are also kind of seeding authoritarianism in mind. And then it says, moral of the story, build your nation, choose strong leadership. Instead of looking for freebies from leaders and voting for those who bring you free goods, choose a leader who will stand to protect you, right? While I agree with both the points, so there is no disagreement. I'm only the way it is being contextualized and being seeded into mind, that is where my worry is. So certainly no, we should not vote on the basis of freebies, but it also says, remember, your country is your family, and you need a father who teaches you to grow and beats you to go to school, right? It beats you to go to school. Don't choose a leader who comes for a season with gifts bought by money saved in your own piggy bank. So no way I'm trying to promote that we should choose a leader who actually gives doles us and gives only freebies, but also it doesn't mean that you should choose a leader as like a father who beats you to go to the school. This is more like giving authoritarianism. So in my opinion, then what is the key lessons coming from it is, being in Afghanistan, actually I started understanding the value and contribution of people like Mahatma Gandhi more. I mean, Gandhi for our generation has been a character, etc. And I have read about him. And when I read about him, he's a great leader, but also a very good strategist. But then being there, I could also relate it with India, that when Britishers were ruling it, and while India was struggling for its own independence, the major challenge was, okay, once Britishers leave, who will rule the country and how will we rule the country? This modern concept of elected government has not been here. The country has been ruled by kings, and there are different princes and princely states, etc. Kaise hoga? And I think Gandhi identified the opportunity. He too used religion. So he was holding Gita all the time. You know, उनका photo देखो तो गीता लेके चल रहे हैं, धोती में. So he used religion to unite people, but in a peaceful manner, not like feeding extremism, right? So he used that token. Majority of population believes in Hinduism, and so certainly the one holy book is Gita. Gita helps me to live a better life, and I can find answer to all my daily life and political answer to those questions in Gita. So why not to use it? So he also took religion, but at the same time he kind of made sure that, hey, I'm here with my own self-interest, right? I don't want to become the next president or prime minister, etc. But only our objective is this. And in my conversation at times with Afghan people being there, I told them that, you know what you need? You need your own Gandhi. There is an opportunity for one of you leaders. You follow the path of Gandhi and unite people in non-violent manner. So currently with the violence, when you are trying to achieve something, it is not going to happen. And Gandhi, and also later Patel, because Patel has also played an important role. So people like them, I started understanding their contribution in much more significant manner being in Afghanistan rather than being there. So in my opinion, then what are the key lessons? For me will be religious fundamentalism or fanatism may ruin the country. So let's not connect with that. It should also not mean that we accept the authoritarianism or on the name of a strong leader and strong state and strong nation or nationalism, as it is said. Humanity is the supreme virtue that has to be restored, and we make sure that anything we do and everything we do, we don't lose on our unity. And this, in this polarized world today, is much more important. The other point, okay. And the next thing is, I would say that while many people would say कि भाई अच्छा तालिबान भी है तो अभी मारकाट नहीं हो रहा है, violence नहीं है, etc. Well, certainly they are coming to rule the country, not the kill entire countrymen, right? And so if you don't have subject, who would rule? Would you rule? The problem is that they would be a threat to women's rights, human rights, people, those who have been working for human rights, like Khalid. Khalid had to leave the country immediately, not even immediately, for a week and all. He had to struggle, and he was hiding at multiple places while Taliban people were raiding house to house. And not just Khalid, I still am in touch with multiple people who worked with me at that point of time, or who I really encouraged. I mean, love them for their fight to do, their courage to do things that they were doing. They all had to hide and save their life, and now they're running away like refugees. And the journalists, so journalists and democratic institutions and NGOs and organizations and civil society rights workers, these people are under the major threat because they are the one who could actually talk against Taliban. And anyone talking against Taliban and Taliban idea, they are under threat. So actually, let's stop here and take some questions.
Sure, sir. Thank you for guiding us. May I now request students or anyone who wishes to ask any question to, I think, either volunteer or raise hands if there is some option, or put your name in the chat boxes. You can raise a hand. Anyone who wants to ask a question.
Yeah. I think there is one question in the chat box, which I would like to put my insight on that.
Yes, sir, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you for these questions. That I think, yeah, let me to see her name. Yeah, Mr. Singh, I think, yeah, Shashanak Singh. Thank you so much for your question. I think the question is about the recent demonstrations or women protests in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, I am not too much optimistic about these demonstrations and these protests, because there are a lot of active ants who are somehow misusing from these opportunities in recent days in Kabul. Because now a lot of civil society activists, because they were very active, now international community take them away from Kabul, and now the people are seeing that, or trying to, they should also find some opportunities for them, like civil society activists, women rights activists, and they are somehow trying to organize protests or demonstrations under different names. But to more specifically answer these questions about, is there any good leader to lead Afghanistan women? Unfortunately, no. Even in last 20 days, millions of dollars expended on the women capacity building issues or projects. But I would like to say that no, we don't have that much powerful woman to control the people, to establish a resistance or a movement to bring all women in together. We have a few, but unfortunately they are corrupted. There are a lot of issues that shows when they were the member of parliament, they were corrupted, and still they are corrupted. They have their mafia groups and a lot of other issues. But regarding the president, he has to, is it possible, do we see any opportunity for Afghan women to lead the country? Unfortunately, no. Not only now, but based on the rules, based on the regulations of Afghanistan, women can never be the president of the country. And unfortunately, this is the rule. So if we have any kind of the government, there is no chance for the woman today should be the leader of the government. They can be the vice president, they can be the deputy, they can be ministers, they can be anyone else, but they can't be president. Thank you so much.
So
Thank you,
yes,
Khalid,
yeah.
for addressing this question. I really hope we restore the human rights in Afghanistan in whatever ways. My second question was there were recently talks in India about how Indian government should make a human intervention to establish human rights in Afghanistan. But my question was how much are the people of Afghanistan ready for this human intervention, where we see in Syria and Iraq, where US and other countries make human intervention, and there are more destruction that happens. So if if I ask you what support you really require from countries like us, what would you say, and what would be your answer to this?
Yeah, maybe Mr. Amit will also put some issues on this, but at the moment, the things that which we really need, so as economic contribution, economic supports for all Afghan nations, and also the most important thing is the world should not recognize Taliban until they change. If they change, it will be somehow good to they recognize and they again establish their relations with them. But if the Taliban continue like now, so our suggestions for the world is they should not be recognized as the official government of Afghanistan.
Okay, a couple of points from me on all of these questions raised. I think these are very important questions. But first, let me recognize Fazal Qureshi for reminding me of this leader from Afghanistan called Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. Yes, that was the name I was trying to remember, and try to study about him. And he seems to be a very interesting character, at least to me. So one thing. Second thing on about women and women rights. I have slightly different views from Khalid. And it's not that I have just a slight different view. I do understand the challenge, and the constitution when doesn't allow women to become president. This is completely impractical. But I'm very optimistic and hopeful. And I'm not only optimistic and hopeful for, in that sense, Afghanistan as a country alone, but I see Islam as a religion has to reinvent itself, like many other religions have, or with the passage of time, we all have to. I mean, if today in 21st century, if I'm living with the ideas of 19th century, do we think I can make sense of the world, or participate and engage in a manner that this new world actually requires me to do? I cannot, right? Same has happened in Hinduism also. It has gone through its own process of reform and reinventing. With, let's say, we had practices like Sati Pratha, where a lady is supposed to be burnt with the fire of her husband, right? Or many other gender discrimination, etc., caste discrimination, etc., that has had this. But we all as a society, we should, number one, need to realize that, well, religion has an important role to play, but religion cannot be the only and the supreme guiding force or the principle to follow. There are many other things also to understand, right? And religion also gives us one way to connect with the, let's say, nature and superpower and God, whatever we call it. Uh, but once again, you cannot do things what we today, the Afghanistan, or I would also say Islam. There are many, many Maulvis that I have met who have given me a completely different version of Islam, which is more liberal, which is more tolerant, which is more inclusive, which talks about women's rights and civil society engagement and participatory democracy and inclusive governance and everything. But then there are some extremists and fundamentalists. And therefore, the major challenge at the moment is not only just for Afghanistan, but this thing, fundamentalism happening on the name of religion or whatever religion, not only just for Islam. But these days, because Islam, on the name of Islam, many things happening, it is becomes more important that Islam reinvents itself with a little bit of modern principles and democracy, etc., etc. And while that happens, sorry, why I'm connecting this to women, I think this reinvention would come actually from the women participation in religion, religious practices. And that is where I see the great interest and passion to do things and reform. Or even if you follow in Hindu mythology, we pray goddess Shakti, right? So Shiva is able to do few things, but Shakti is able to do. And similarly, I feel that next level of big reform and reinvention within Islam would, or in my opinion, likely to come from women. Muslim women are sisters and girls and daughters and mothers and all of them. And when the society as an overall Islamic society slowly is able to accept it, then the rules have to change. Rules changes all the time. And that makes me actually hopeful for Afghanistan and Islam, religion, for a peaceful world, peaceful South Asia, peaceful Central Asia. So that should happen. So that's my point number one. Khalid, do you want to add anything to what I said? Or then I would go to the second question raised by Shashank.
It's okay, Amit. Yeah, you can go ahead, please.
Okay. So the second question is by Shashank. It is very amusing to me that despite considering the previous regime of Taliban and their targets of attack, why there were still a section of people, especially in India, that were expecting a path-breaking regime from Taliban? Was it more to neutralize polarization? Well, this is how the politics is played, right? You are taking an opportunity, and that is why even I mentioned of a social media post. So there will always be a group who are trying to take advantage of situation and interpreting the events in a manner that benefits them. But this is where we as a citizen have to be careful that we may choose to listen to everyone, but we don't fall into the propaganda narrative set up by a few. So that's important. And you can see who were the people talking about, or it was just this news was spread to sensationalize and all of that. The next question comes up: what kind of role that India should be playing? Should India now also try to, as it is, should go and help people of Afghanistan and all of that? When you say, once again, help people of Afghanistan, meaning who? Whether this will be Hazaras, Tajik, Uzbekish, Pashto, etc., who? At the moment, also which will also mean when the Taliban currently is ruling the country and you are going and interacting with people of Afghanistan, which means you are going against the ruler of the day, which may not be of strategically beneficial. So for all the practical reasons, India would also have to interact with the government of the day, whether it is Taliban, whether it is Mujahideen, whether it is US-led government, etc., whoever it is. So you will have to interact. For an example, right now India, when it was trying to evacuate its own people, and when Taliban is ruling, you have to talk to them and you have to negotiate and you have to build a kind of relationship and trust, etc. That has to happen. Second thing, this entire thing about, US going and bringing democracy to other countries, or India should go and work with Afghanistan people to bring democracy and restore peace and civil rights, etc., etc. No. Once again, all of these values it will have to come from its own, from inside rather than outside. Any country going to Afghanistan, or so for the matter, any other country, even in Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or Pakistan or Kashmir, is not a country, but in China and Tibet or whatever. So it's a process, and we have to kind of give time and space for the process to evolve, and then that can be facilitated to match, but would never be suggested that India should go and help people bring democracy there, etc., etc. No, that will be like suicidal. Okay. Bhavya, do you want me to add or continue answering these questions coming here, or?
So yes, sir, I would. I'll be extremely. Yeah. So I think, sir, there is another student, Aryan, who has raised his hand. Sir, I would request you to answer certain questions which come up amongst the students, even if there would be some short answers. I think so that students get a chance to speak up. I just want, because they have come and attended. Aryan, could you please unmute and speak?
Hi, Bhavya, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to give my greetings to both Khalid sir and Amit sir. I hope you are having a great day. I just want to ask you a question that since Afghanistan has seen foreign interventions since for a long time, whether it was 1970 or 2001, do you think that foreign intervention in Afghanistan has done more damage than it has to do good? Or does that, or foreign intervention is required more since the situation has gone this bad? So that was my question, sir. Thank you.
Khalid, do you want to answer, or should I?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, dear Amit. Thank you, friends, for asking the questions. So before these questions, I would like to also put some insights on the first questions regarding the India role in Afghanistan. At the moment, you are wondering a lot because of the Taliban. They raised their flag also in Pakistan. And they somehow said that they are going to start their jihad in Pakistan too. So it means that the getting of Afghanistan, getting the control of Afghanistan is a very good news for the Taliban and also for the all extremist groups in all over the world. So it somehow make all of them hopeful that they can continue their works, they can work harder to get the control of every city, every country that they want. And now the Taliban, the Pakistani Taliban that who raise their flag on there, somehow it put me in a lot of tensions, in a lot of thinking. To think strategically if the situation become out of the control by Pakistan government, and if the Taliban start their jihad in Pakistan more strongly, I'm worrying a lot, because if the nuclear weapons of Pakistan become on the hand of these insurgents, extremist groups, so think what will happen. If they get the more power in Pakistan, so then what will happen for the region? So there are a lot of thinkings, there are a lot of points to worry about that. For that reason, I think India should act very strong in Afghanistan. India should help by different ways Afghan people. India did in the past. They helped a lot Afghan people, Afghan government, but now they should change their policy, their strategy with new methods. They should not work with those politicians who are totally corrupted, who don't have a place among the people at the moment. And India should change their strategy in order to somehow how they should about the foreign interventions in Afghanistan too. Is it good or is it bad? But based on my knowledge, based on my idea, I think every kind of interventions to any other country is totally bad. It's not a good work. Every country should stand by themselves. Should be in a sustainable peace. Should have a sustainable democracy by themselves. So at the moment, all the taxpayers, not at the moment in the past, in the last 20 years, all the taxpayers from all over the world, they send their billions, their millions of dollars to Afghanistan. So what we have at the moment will corrupt the governments, will corrupt the people, will corrupt everything. And in the same thing, like with interventions, when you interfere to another country policies, to another country government, and you want to share your democracy with them or share your ideas with them on different ways, I think it will be not successful. And Afghanistan is a very good example of this for everyone. So I think every nation, every country should stand by themselves and they should follow their rules. But what we need, not interventions, not interfering. What we need, every country, every nation needs for different supports, different issues from other countries. So we should not call that interfering or interventions. But Afghanistan needs the support of international community, but not the interventions or interfering of other countries. If on the 2001, on the first Bonn conference, which was held for Afghanistan, if the world on that time agreed to establish the government, for example, only by among Afghans, but they have to support Afghan people in different strategical ways. Even on that time, it was acceptable somehow. It was possible somehow to they even invited the Taliban representative to. On that time, they made a joint government. But now it is too late. And based on my knowledge, maybe Dr. Hamid also put something, interventions or interfering to any country system is totally wrong, and it is not a good action to take.
Thank you for addressing the questions. I think we have one more question in the chat box by Sanjana Kumari. And I quote, she writes, and I quote, "The way USA got its troop out, and it seems that USA is not interested in getting stability in Afghanistan. So India's role in Afghanistan becomes more important. So should India form a regional group to help Afghanistan? Would it be successful?"
Yeah,
Do you want me to answer, or
no, please, because I already raised some issues about these questions. You can put your insight.
Okay. Number one, this is also key learning coming from my stay in Afghanistan. I increasingly understood the importance of what is shown in media and how things are presented versus what the reality is. And therefore, anytime or every time you get something through media, do validate and also try to understand what you are reading, why you are reading it, and who has interest in putting that news there, so that you create that kind of perception. And these days specifically, the only war doesn't happen. So when Taliban is capturing Afghanistan or US is capturing, there is psycho warfare as well. So they would put things on media and social media which kinds of appeals, and that might give you impression of like Taliban 2.0 or US 2.0 or whatever. And therefore should be careful. And all of these things I'm talking in reference to my answer to this question by Sanjana, who says the way USA got its troops out, and it seems that USA is not interested in getting stability in Afghanistan. This is what they're saying, and this is pretty much evident, but I would say this is half truth. It's truth, but half truth, not completely. So this is what they were trying to do for last 20 years. But as they realize that every year they are making investment of trillions of dollars and still not getting much, and it has become a huge burden. So post 9/11, based on their super power ko hila diya type ka in their attitude or arrogance or ego, they invaded Afghanistan. And it was all justified because, yes, there are terrorist groups who had planned to kind of attack on the sovereignty and liberty of the United States of India. And so it's justified, and they attacked here. But 20 years, and soon after they had realizing that, number one, how long they are going to go to control it. And therefore, the people in Afghanistan have to take charge. And that is when I said it was a huge opportunity for people in Afghanistan, different groups together to come, and there was a role for Gandhi-like of politics, and etc., etc. So they did try to make an investment. They also brought India and other neighboring countries to make investment in Afghanistan to rebuild, etc., etc. So they did it. It will be half truth to say they were never interested. No, they were interested, and they were making investment in through government and also through multiple civil society organizations, NGOs, and USAID was working there. I worked with an organization which was supported by USAID, etc., etc. So they were making investment, but only when they realized that they can. This is not a sustainable venture, and something similar could be. Have been claimed in case of India too, that when Britishers left, they didn't leave it only because of Indian independence struggle. They also realized that it has become completely unsustainable for them to rule the country. And at the same time, US soldiers were being killed. So in some sense, it was a loss and loss. It had become loss and loss proposition, and they had to go out. When they had to go out, and they realized that in 20 years, the so-called democratic government that they set up, they constituted, has not been able to unite and lead the way forward. I would say would be more in the frustration of US also. They realized, what is the other option I have? The only people who are actually fighting and giving us trouble is the Taliban group. Let's talk to them. And when I was there before that, I have always understood Taliban as a terrorist group, right? Even in my own perception. And when I was there, I got to see that there are multiple rounds of conversation happening between US representatives and Taliban representatives in Doha. In Qatar, Taliban has its own office formally. I always thought that these are the terrorist groups hiding in the caves and mountains, etc. The world and US is trying to hunt them. And here I say, they are sitting across the table and negotiating. And it was not just one round of conversation, like multiple rounds of conversation had happened, which simply meant, and what was very interesting thing that I learned, that they were negotiating peace in Afghanistan, and this is being negotiated between Taliban and US representatives, and the so-called elected government of Afghanistan was not part of it. So Taliban, from the day one, they had kind of made it a point that they would negotiate with US, because Taliban by default, they said that we are the rightful representatives, ye government, so ye to fake hai. It's illegitimate. And therefore, don't bring them to the table. We are not going to talk to them on the table. Because only at a later stage, when kind of US had finalized quite a bit of deal, they were invited to attend a few rounds of meetings with few representatives. Usme bhi bahut jhamela tha. I mean, then Ghani also took on his ego that he cannot go, so he should send a representative. Then who would go in the representative? So Afghanistan also has a system called Jigra or Jirga. What is that called?
Loya Jirgas.
Loya Jirgas. So Loya Jirgas are kind of local.
And Shuras councils, I think tribal councils they have.
Right. So they sent kind of representatives from all of these groups. And this had become like a huge, like 200, 300 people ka representative. It was not like one or two or five, like full of people with full of planes going to this negotiation council and participating. And then you could make up ki bhai ye nahi hone wala hai. This is not how it is going to happen. In any case, so coming back to the key question, sorry, I'm also talking, I realize talking too much. But the key question is that should India create like a regional forum or group to help Afghanistan? No. I mean, the best thing is just don't do anything at the moment. Yes, and whatever help, etc., you have to give, you will have to strategically see what things can be done on face of it and what things can be done in the background. And that should be taken as a hint to my answer.
Sure, sir. Yeah. I think there have been two more questions. I think Varsha is there. So would you like to speak it out yourself or should I read it? Varsha Chaudhary.
Yes. So basically, so my question is that it is really shocking that how the US has made a base to Afghanistan and in 2001, and since then he claimed that he was a savior of the world and to eradicate the terrorism from Afghanistan and to weaken the Taliban regime over there and to support the Afghan army. Then suddenly after they just put back their troops from Afghanistan, the US claimed that we are not fighting against Taliban, we are fighting against Al Qaeda, and this Taliban 2.0 is something called good Taliban. So they have the reformation policy, they come up with the new liberal Islamism, they will allow eventually the women to go to school, and the promises which were done by the Taliban this time. So is it not very controversial statement by USA, who eventually claimed this Taliban as a terrorist organization, and there are many leader in the Taliban group whom US consider that they are the terrorists. So what about this? How US has changed their statement like this?
Yes, it is. And to give you a very short answer, you are completely right. Entire thing that is being done from the peace negotiation to Taliban, and even days to come that US is likely to do, all of those together, I call it just a face-saving exercise. So as I said, they invaded, they realized cannot sustain it. They have been funding, and since they cannot sustain it, they decided to pull back, leave, and this could be a big blot on the name of US as a superpower of the world, that which is leaving the country where it came to kind of restore democracy and peace and prosperity and build the country, etc., and now leaving with almost nothing. And therefore, negotiation with Taliban and negotiation even, let's say, with Pakistan, and the things that they have done, and even in days to come, the US will be doing. They will do a lot of face-saving exercise, and therefore you find the contradiction, which is, I think, very well identified.
So, indirectly, US is, giving legitimacy to this Taliban government with their controversial statement.
Yes. Formally, they have not given, but the day they made their strategic shift to have a negotiation across the table with Taliban, I think the wind has moved to a different direction that day itself. And that is why even when I was interacting with my Afghan colleagues who had a great sense of politics, local politics than me or anyone external could possibly have, I kept telling them that this is what is going to happen. And that is when I also said, just a week before when Taliban captured Kabul, I had predicted that this is what it is going to happen. And I had requested my friends who all were there to leave the country as soon as possible. So yes, so strategically, the direction had shifted long ago. We are only seeing some part of consequences of that direction today, and we'll see more in future, which may include formally recognizing the Taliban government in Afghanistan.
Thank you, sir, for addressing the question. Now we have Abhishek's question in the chat box. He says that in his opinion, international actions are very unreliable, and Afghan people can't wait for that only. So he asks, what can be the possible steps to get out of this tyranny, like especially for Afghan citizens? What are the possible steps? And considering that people are now accepting it helplessly and they don't have any other alternative, so what, according to you, are possible steps to get out of this tyranny?
Okay. If I have to answer this question, so for any country, this is where you can get the concept of self-reliance or Atmanirbhar or something. For any country, democracy or freedom, all of that coming from outside, from a different country would not make sense. Slightly, we will have to wait for some time, and I would also not say to wait and watch for a very long time. Just wait for another, let's say 15, 20 days or 30 days max and see what happens to this Panjshiri resistance. If they can gather the momentum and are able to build a strong opposition to the Taliban government, then the strategy might be different. But if they are not able to, which most likely is to happen because Taliban is much more powerful, etc., and you have Russia and China, etc. So, on any days, on the request of Taliban, if Taliban is not able to capture Panjshir, the Chinese would do and gift it to Afghanistan, to the Taliban, etc. So for all reasons, I see that Taliban is now the new reality. Whether you are comfortable or not, you will have to accept this new reality. And in this case, what can be done? For all the groups now, because this is the rule of the day, you will have to participate within this rule of the day, and hoping that slowly they would also change, and also they would have to change based on the popular majority and what the people want. Because in any case, for let's say all the women together decided that they would not use burqa, for an example, can Taliban or any government in the world can massacre all the women? No, right? As long as it is one minority and we are divided, kisi ek aurat ke sath hua, other aurat, I mean, it happens with one lady and all other ladies and gents will hide in our safe place, then the violence would continue to happen, right? The injustice would continue to happen. So slowly, that is where I would see the role of organizations and democratic leaders and liberal leaders, and even within the religion, the Maulvis and all, there are multiple different groups, that they should come together and build slowly that kind of consensus where even Taliban or whomsoever is the power of the day will have to accept these new realities. For an example, let's say even in the Middle East countries, there are countries where women were not supposed to have a driving license. But over a period of time, as things change, and now they are also accepting the new reality, right? So within that rule, people have to participate and build a change narrative, and they will have to say that why this is a progressive thing. And in a 21st century, we need a world of this kind, etc. Only having fundamentalists or only based on Shariat law, etc., etc., you cannot do things that is needed in today's world, today's modern democratic world. So that would be my way of thinking.
Sir, sir, can I ask a question? I myself have a question. Yes.
Why not?
Yes, sir. So actually, like while I have been myself reading about this entire Afghanistan crisis for a while, I had been reading a book even by Robert D. Cruz and Amin Tarzi on Afghanistan and other such issues at large. So my question is that while sir, while we analyze this entire issue, ultimately, like I had like when I was reading about it, I was quite intrigued that Afghanistan, despite the way that xenophobia which exists in the people of Afghanistan about the foreign, and there is a distinction which is being made about foreign intervention and about foreign influence in Afghanistan in a way which could be in terms of humanitarian or aid activities. So ultimately, like I myself try to understand that what is it that has gone wrong in Afghanistan which pushed it into this tyranny for the past 40 years. Was it after the 1978 communist coup or the 1979 Soviet intervention, and then there was some sort of a Mujahideen resistance which was constructed, and then my idea is the problem I have is ultimately there are 2 to 3 things which are attached to my question. One is, what is this idea of jihad? First, that is my entire question, because you hear it out everywhere, and what is it that marks the origins of Taliban as a force in itself? Because I've been reading about the books, and what I've come across is that they always say, okay, that these guys have come from Pakistan, and wherein they used to get the training. Even countries like Pakistan and Iran, they had a very huge role in doing that. Even the US, to an extent, due to the global geopolitics and the Cold War era, the Great Game, which used to happen earlier also, and that for having that sort of an influence in Afghanistan. So a lot of things happened over there. So ultimately, how do you trace the origins of Taliban? Is it something really ideological? Because I think the very reason US waged war was because they said, look, they harbor terrorists. We have no problem with Taliban, but we have problem with them harboring terrorists. And even in the recent US Taliban deal, they say they should not be an attack or a terror threat to US and the allied troops. They're not caring about the other people. They say that, look, we do not care about the nation building in Afghanistan. And yet they claim to have said, okay, that look, we have done so much construction activities. And I don't know why, what sort of, I have a lot of problem in a way with that sort of a thing in a way. So ultimately, while we look forward, while we have been discussing about the Trump Taliban deal, about the very fact that the Afghan government was not made a factor in it, about the I don't know what to say, that about the bad leadership of Sri Ashraf Ghani and other such people who, and like we have also been hearing about corruption. Even though we say that the Afghan National Army had more than 3 lakh soldiers, then why was it that they were not able to offer fruitful resistance? I think these are certain important questions. And even if, okay, they were not able to offer those questions, like I do not know that why, if that withdrawal had to happen, why it had to happen in such a way as if you are just the other day I was just hearing someone from the US government White House saying that, look, we are begging Taliban to allow our people to leave. I don't know if that is how the situation has to be. While I also acknowledge there have been reports wherein people say that, look, some human rights violations have happened in Afghanistan by their own government. And about the entire perception which is constructed amongst the people of Afghanistan is that who can provide us stability, who can provide us security. They, on what ground they are united? They are united on the ground that, look, there is a threat to our religion. We have to come together and unite. So ultimately, sir, while we talk about all of these organizations, be it Al Qaeda or ISIS or even Lashkar-e-Taiban, what all of these things do. So ultimately, I do not. My question is that what has been a fruitful consequence of US intervention in Afghanistan? If the very reason why you entered there was to eradicate terrorism, the point is that, and I agree with Dr. Amit Chandra sir when he said that you can kill people, but you cannot kill an ideology. But then there were also reports about how moderate factions within Afghanistan had been so brutally assaulted. So ultimately, this peace building, peace conflict resolution approaches, I think, I don't know, I personally do not know what direction they are taking for the future. And my question is then, sir, that in the light of all these issues, whether the rise of Taliban was ideological, and whether all of these, how this entire withdrawal was in a way initiated, what was it that actually brought into the minds of Afghan people that we have to accept them? I fail to understand that. If you could a bit comment upon it, I request even Khalid sir and Amit Chandra sir to even give it, and to even give their perspective. And ultimately, now how do we see the future of Afghanistan? How do we see about the human rights and about, like, because I understand as a student of international relations also that it is all about national interests. Ultimately, each country wants to pursue its national interests. There is a, and my only question, last question, is that what is the implication it will gonna have for the regional security and for the international arena at large? Iska kya, what will be its implication overall?
Khalid, do you want to make an attempt, and then I would add a few lines?
Thank you, Amit. To answer this, I have just a few small points to the last two questions. The first question was about the withdrawal of U.S. soldiers and lifting of and leaving of U.S. from Afghanistan. To be honest, yes, unfortunately, U.S. left Afghanistan in a very, very unresponsible and in a very bad way. We were thinking that maybe the president of US will based on a strategy, will remove their troops from Afghanistan slowly, but by considering of the peace negotiation, because the peace negotiation was very close to Taliban come and join with the government. On that case, we will not lose that the things that much that we lost already. But unfortunately, they leave alone Afghanistan in a very bad situation and very immediately. So they just decided they should get out of the country, and they did it in a very unprofessional way. And they made a few buildings or a few things for soldiers or for some other purposes. Even they destroyed their properties to should not be usable anymore for us or for anyone in Afghanistan. And now I'm sure that they understand that the way that they left Afghanistan, it was not in a proper way. And now they are watching the cost of that. The second question, it was about how Afghan people can,
and that is why once again I will bring the relevance of Gandhi and Gandhi kind of politics based on non-violence, etc., being so important. So now people in Afghanistan have to understand that no more jiski lathi uska bhai, no more on the basis of power we decide on the basis of principles and ethics and morality, etc., etc. Otherwise, if they don't take this lesson, they would continue to be in insecurity. They will have another group coming in, and they will have internal people fighting for power, etc. So giving you a very clear answer, this is what has happened. But why was this done? This was done against the fear. When Britishers invaded, that time British India invaded Afghanistan, why did they go? Because they were afraid that Russia, which is slowly becoming a superpower, will come and capture it. Why it would capture it? Because they want to access to the sea, right? So similarly, in the fear, Britishers went, and why even this later on was realized that it was a wrong hypothesis made by the Britishers. Initially, Russians were not interested. But now they've started feeling insecure that Britishers are capturing, and through that they can actually might invade Russia as well, and therefore they invaded it. Right? Then US took it as like Russia is growing power, and US didn't like it. They kind of supplied and supported Mujahideen and groups. And these were the local groups who were kind of supported with arms and ammunition, etc., etc. But the raising ground happened to be the masjid, the mosque. So in the mosque, they use that religion which talks about jihad, and that is where this concept of jihad comes. Jihad comes is fighting for your freedom, fighting for your religion, fighting for your family, fighting for your land. So this is a holy fight to get into. And therefore, US, with the help of Pakistan, they supplied arms and ammunition and resources to the local groups to fight against Russia. And all of that happened on the name of religion. Now, ultimately, chalo, that happened, let's say, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, etc. What is the key lesson that we should see? This is not how we can continue. If we continue like this, as Khalid was mentioning, this can cause a major security threat in the entire region and then around the world. Because let's say Pakistan also, which is celebrating at the moment, considering Taliban win as their own win, they themselves would come under trouble. Why? Because once again, if the rule is this, then there are fundamentalist groups within Pakistan also who are now furthermore confident, and Talibani Pakistan, they would start capturing power, and they may throw out Imran Khan or whomsoever is the government in power in days to come in future, 5 years, 10 years down the line. The rule is whomsoever has the power, right? Etc. So something that you are celebrating as your victory might convert into your future defeat as well. And anyways, so jihad, then if your question is about the concept, this is supposed to be a holy war, and that this was pretty much particularly used by Mujahideens to fight against Russia. And by the way, Herat in Afghanistan, they have a museum. It's called Jihad Museum, where they have kept all the arms and ammunition जो Russia का tanker मार के गिराए थे, or the things they have captured, or that time the MiG fighter planes, etc. They have kept it. And I was actually fortunate enough to go there and click a few pictures, and I could myself see that. So there is a, so jihad is a good concept, and there is a jihad museum, and that is taken as a pride that we do. But once again, jihad is misinterpreted. One of the things actually I wanted to do, it may sound very funny to all of you, wanted to do during my stay in Afghanistan, but I couldn't do it, is I wanted to meet one of the suicide attackers, but I couldn't do it. Certainly those are not available, and you never know who is the suicide attacker. Because my curiosity was also to know, if I become a suicide attacker, and for whatever cause I am fighting for, one thing is very clear. I don't know my mission succeeds in future or not. What I'm going to do, whether I'm going to kill someone, that person will die or not, that I don't know. But one thing is pretty much sure, that I will die, right? So what makes someone to become a suicide bomber, where I'm willing to sacrifice my whole life, right, for anything? For this
their idea
cause.
of Jannat and paradise is something which is very problematic.
Exactly. And Jannat, the idea of Jannat so engraved that I see that, only when I die, I will get it, right? So this has been blessed. We don't want to live this blessed life with doing many good things that we can do in this world, but we are so attracted with this idea, this concept of Jannat, which no one has seen ever. But anyways, so this is how you brainwash, right? And that is why time and again why I'm saying religion has become the opium here, which is killing things, and then violence and gun power and muscle power. And so these rules have to go. Finally, in terms of what is fruitful outcome of US intervention, at the moment, actually none. In fact, it is leaving things in worse condition. But I would not once again go with one narrative that people are talking about 20 years of investment all washed away. Actually, I have also given this statement in media, but let me also clarify. When that in media, you have 40 seconds to do it. But what I meant was more in terms of social development, not infrastructure. Infrastructure, let's say, people are crying, India made like billions of dollar investment in Afghanistan. Not now all of that is like gone and wasted and washed away. No, nothing. Like the dam you build, Taliban is not going to destroy the dam, right? The parliament building you have built is not going to destroy. They would actually like to use it. Where the problem happens is the major fallback is the social development aspect. So let's say for the schools that we built, or it takes immense amount of work to kind of encourage women and fight with the society rules and regulations to get people out and go to school and study, right? In terms of access to health, infrastructure, women empowerment, gender discrimination, civil rights, freedom of speech, that social development aspect, it is not like infrastructure. Infrastructure is like building, chalo maan lo gir bhi gayi, you can rebuild it. But rebuilding the social development is far more challenging. And that is where the biggest loss is. कि उसको revise करना, revert करना बहुत मुश्किल हो जाएगा. And in that sense, US now actually coming, invading, and now leaving is actually leaving it in much worse scenario, both in terms of local situation and also in terms of the international recognition, etc., etc. Because now the superpower is defeated, then the group that has defeated us can go on a different kind of confidence, right? And now they will get legitimacy, and immediately as there is a US-China war, that is why China was fast to capitalize on this situation. Next, if the part of the question I could quickly answer is in terms of what should international communities be doing, etc., etc. For that part of question is all the international agendas are motivated with national interest. So India has its own interest, Pakistan has its own interest, China has, Iran has, Iraq has, right? US has, Russia has, and they will be. And therefore, international things should not also become the dominating policy or principle to look for, because it will be driven by default, it will be driven by the self agenda. Let me tell you an incident here when I was there. So this incident happened that Trump was the president of the US. And during that time, what happened, once a drone entered into Iran airspace. So this drone was kept to monitor developments in Iran, Turkey, including Afghanistan, but it had entered into Iran's airspace where Iran struck it down. So as they realized, they struck it down. And that kind of irritated Trump and US government, and they realized, like, the superpower ka drone maar giraya aapne, how could, even if it had entered, number one, we have kept it for surveillance and to make sure that there is regional peace, etc., etc. So hum apne use ke liye nahi kar rahe hain, while all these could be the face-saving exercise, but it took it very negatively, and to the extent they had decided to invade Iran, attack on Iran. To the extent it was everything was done, the planning had happened, etc., etc. Only it was in last, some media reports, internal reports leaking out, which is only in the last 5 or 10 minutes, Trump changed its mind and decided not to do it. For whatever reason, whatever sanity prevailed in him, and I think that was a good thing that he didn't do it. But during this course of dialogue and action and uncertainty, what was happening, I realized US putting a drone in Iran space, Iran bringing down this drone, then US threatening Iran for a war, and then Iran, what it said? It didn't say that, okay, if you attack us, we will also attack on US. They said, if you attack on us, we are going to destroy Saudi. Now think about where the Saudi is coming from, because US has made major investments in Saudi, right? So that is another, so you see the international politics has gone so complicated and so much that it becomes difficult to at times even make sense of ye kya ho raha hai aur kyun ho raha hai. When I was there, this Taran Singh border, what is this India-Pakistan border where Sikh pilgrimages were allowed? What is this border gate which was opened by Imran Khan? Taran Singh, whatever. So think about like whatever border, there is a border. So Sikhs have a Gurudwara there in Pakistan, which close by after the border, Saranpur or Sarak, whatever border is that called. And then Pakistan
Taran Taran. It's called Taran Taran.
Taran Taran is a place, yes, but so this border was in a very friendly gesture opened by Pakistan. कि भाई हम border खोल रहे हैं so that all the Sikh people who want to come to this Gurudwara should be able to visit it. Now this should be seen as a very good development, right? Towards the peace and restoring confidence and building good relationships. But by few groups, it was seen as exactly opposite. And thereafter, the Haqqani Network group had issued a fatwa saying we are going to target Indians from Delhi to Kabul. Right? Why? Because they realized that Imran Khan has kind of has not followed the process it should have negotiated, and it should be strong with dealing with Modi government, etc., etc. It is more like you have gifted the buffet to them. So fundamentalists they didn't like about it. Anyways, so you in that sense you have to understand there are multiple dynamics in case of international relationship too. And Afghanistan is a very good place to kind of understand all of these. And when I'm talking about the religion and Islam has to reform, within that also we will have to see there are multiple schools of thought. One which is supposed to be the most violent, dangerous one is called Wahhabi. So Wahhabi, so even when we say Islam and Islamic State, not every Muslim is fighting, right? Not everyone is like, and therefore we should also be very careful in terms of branding people and all of that. So there are school of thought, and that possibly, and that is what I think US also tried to do in terms of good.
So is Deobandi school of thought the same as Wahhabi, the Deobandi?
No, Deobandi is a different school of thought. And compared to Wahhabis, they are supposed to be a peaceful group. But radicalization is happening, and we need to realize that increasingly there is a polarization around the world, not just in India or any place. But that is what is testing time. I think Afghanistan has given us very good lessons for not only for India, Pakistan, around the world, and we should take it. And I think that is where I should also stop, and we have taken too much time. I have also other commitments to make.
No, sure. No problem, sir. Thank you. I am glad that you all attended. So I think Sir Jagdish, sir, if you would like to say something, if we can then propose the vote of thanks.
I just thank the speaker. I'm not, but I understand, when Nazis taking over Germany, intellectuals were the first one to be attacked, and the liberals always have to struggle hard and sacrifice. And I can very well understand, even in a relatively more liberal society in India, we face threat these days. You want to say anything against the current government, it's very easily, you're
Yes, sir. So you're not audible now.
Yeah, I was saying I very well emphasize the MCS. But it's also a class of intellectuals who deal with us. This was refused to bow down.
So I think there is some internet connectivity issue. Probably we are not able to hear you clearly. Aftar, should we propose a vote of thanks? I guess. I think
yes, yes, yeah.
I think I should
Yeah,
do
go on.
that now. So okay. On behalf of the entire political science department and I, Bhavya Batra, the president of the department, extend a solemn vote of thanks to all those who have attended today's session. Especially, I thank Dr. Ramachandra sir, Khalid Ramizi sir, who have taken out time from their precious schedules to attend today's session. I also render my heartfelt apologies for the delay, 1 hour delay, which happened in the beginning. Probably there were certain issues, and even since we were conducting this for the first time in the online mode, so I hope that we take care of these issues from next time and ensure that there is very smooth conduct of the same. Lest I thank I thank both the speakers and panelists for giving us so beautiful insights, for explaining us the issue in such a great detail. We are really thankful for your words of wisdom. Also, I would like to thank Dr. Jagdish Chandra sir from our department, the faculty member who came and joined us. And I also extend a heartfelt thanks to Students for Liberty, to Shremadan, who is a North India coordinator from SFL, for this collaboration. And we look forward to someday meeting you in our college and for a more better discussion. By better, I mean by a discussion wherein we could have more students joining us at a more larger scale, because I think this issue will remain in the media and it will continue to dominate the scene for a long time to come. And hence, I am thankful to all of you who have gathered over here, all the students who assembled today, and the teachers and our panel, our respected guests. Thank you, sir. Bye, sir.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Khalid, sir. Thank you, Jagdish, sir. Thank you, Aftar. Thank you, Shrey.